Hello and welcome. This is Mouse Gunner, and we're back with some more from the depths. In this video, I'll be showing off another airborne craft. As in my last video, I showed off a hot air balloon. In this video, I'll be showing off a float plane, or a float jet as I call it, because it does use jet engines to power it. Now, initially, I designed this to be a prop-driven craft, but I was noticing, at least with my initial builds, that I just wasn't getting enough speed to get up off the water. So it wasn't really working out. So that might be something I revisit and work with more. But for the meantime, to simplify things, I just slapped on some jet engines there to power this thing up. And that will simplify things in a couple other ways as well that I'll get into in a little bit later. Now this does have a couple armaments on it. I have a couple missile launchers here, which I've already gone over in a little bit of detail on my paddle steamer video. But they do use infrared seekers for their guidance. And I do have an autocannon in the nose for backup armament. Now, the jet engines here, now there are 3 here, as well as 1 here in the rear. You will need that much thrust to get off the water. So it does take quite a bit of thrust. And I think a lot of that has to do with the weight of the pontoons. They're pretty heavy. To give yourself enough of a pontoon to be able to float on the water, you're going to add a lot of weight, so you do need a lot of thrust. Now, the jet engines you might think will power themselves, and that's what I initially thought, and I just filled this thing with full of fuel tanks and thought that was enough. Well, you will need an engine to power them. That may not be very intuitive, and that did kind of confuse me a little bit, but I do have an engine in here to power the jet engine, so you will need that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into the builder here a little bit and discuss what you all need. So I already talked about the jet engines here. There they are. You have a couple different sizes. You have your normal size, which are the ones I showed, and then the huge jet engines. And with the design layout that I had, it initially trying to be a prop-driven craft, I didn't really allow for that room, so I just used the smaller jet engines. And you'll need wings, which I have obviously on either side of the plane, and the ailerons to control it on the wings. And then you'll need a tail section, or they call the tail plane, in the rear. And that's pretty much all you need. But it's very key that you balance the thrust, because that was one thing that took me quite a bit of working with. And that's why the jet engines are placed where they are, is for the weight, for the thrust to be balanced right where it needs to be to give yourself stable flight. It's kind of tricky to do, and you're going to have to work with it. But I think a usual, from what I saw, a good guidance point is where, and it does show you when you're in the builder, where your center of balance is as far as weight, is where you kind of want to put the thrust along. And we can show that in a second. Now, for control, you're going to need just a normal vehicle controller, and then you switch to the air mode to control everything. Now, with that prop-driven craft, what I was talking about it being a little bit more complex is I would have also needed a spin block controller to start the prop up, and then once the prop was started, I wouldn't have been able to control it at all. I would have just essentially set the prop for whatever speed I need it to be, which was pretty much top speed, and then go back to the vehicle controller to control all of the other elements of the craft. So that is one thing that, this is simplified, just having the one set of controls. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at getting up into the air here. Let's switch the HUD on and hop back into my body here. Now, I like to do this in first-person mode because I feel like I have the best control of the craft in this viewpoint. So I apologize if this isn't your favorite viewpoint, but it also, having the HUD up, you can see the control layout here, as well as, my current speeds and everything. And you can also kind of see my weapon layout. So what I did is I set up the weapons with weapon groups, which you can do just by hitting Q on any weapon. So group 1 is going to be my autocannon, which you can hear that fire just now. And group 2 and 3 are going to be, each of those groups will be one of my missile launchers. All right, so we can get up into the air. And the other reason I like being in first-person mode is I can just glance right here at my engine to see how much fuel I have, or I can glance behind me at my reserve tank to see how much fuel I have. So that's really nice as far as I'm concerned to know exactly how much fuel I have, because as much as there's a fuel indicator here, it doesn't show how much fuel is actually running in the engine, so I'd have to look at the engine to see that. All right, so let's power this thing up. It does take a little while to get up to enough speed to get up into the air. So I'm just gonna hold down the lift button, or J in this case. You can see that I'm holding it down because it's kind of gotten bigger, and I've got max thrust going. And we'll just have to get up to airspeed. I think it's somewhere around a little bit over 20 meters a second you'll need. And having a lot of, heavy waves and stuff is going to throw you off a little bit. But right now the seas are kind of calm, so we're going to minimize a lot of the bobbing around, which kind of is one of the things that makes this take a little bit longer. Another thing is those missile launchers do weigh me down quite a bit, so that does also make this a little bit longer takeoff. But eventually we'll get enough speed up and start lifting off, which we're doing now. And now we're in the air, so we can start gaining altitude here. And I'm going to bank around. Now, essentially, the controls are actually surprisingly fluid in the air. You have H and K are your roll or bank. U and J are going to be up and down, and it's going to be reversed. Obviously, U is down and J is up. And Y and I are your rudder. So, using I now to wheel myself around. And that's pretty much it. And it's as I said, it's amazingly fluid and well done, the controls, and I was actually pretty pleasantly surprised with how they turned out, because my experience with a couple other games where you kind of build craft like this, sometimes they just don't get the controls down very well. So especially when you're building a craft like this that's an aircraft, it's kind of cool to do that, but the headache that the controls are quickly take your fun away. So we can kind of keep an eye on our fuel right here by just looking at it directly, or we can look behind us to look at our fuel in our reserve tank. We've already gone through a fair amount of it. This being jet engine powered, it is pretty fuel thirsty. Let's go ahead and get some enemies going. So typically the sea adders are my normal low level enemies, so I pumped a few of those in, and let's try and find where they are. All right, there's a couple over there. And essentially, my main armament is going to be those missile launchers. So I'm going to switch over to one of them. I'm going to get myself a little bit of distance here, but you can see the craft behind me. And we'll just climb here. And then eventually I'll bank down and swoop down on them. I love the seagulls and stuff that are in this game as well. All right, missile 1 and missile 2. Missiles are away. Switch over to my autocannon. We'll do a run on them with the autocannon. Autocannon's kind of hard to hit with because I can't really see too well what I'm aiming at. And there is quite a bit of a drop on it, but let's go ahead and give a burst there. Ooh, just barely missed that. I don't think I hit anything, otherwise I would have gotten an indicator in the upper right. But we see a lot of explosions from the missiles. And I have to be careful here as they are firing at me. Kind of avoid them. Okay. Now again, this being in first person mode, you're very limited in your view. Right now I can't see them, but to get visibility, I'm just going to climb up for a bit. And there they are behind me. Now, if this was not in, creative mode like this, I wouldn't be getting my ammo supply, back. So I probably would only be able to make one run like that. Essentially, I wouldn't be able to reload my missiles. I might have a few passes with the autocannon, but after I fired off my missiles, I'd pretty much be done. I'd have to go back to base and rearm. So that's one thing to consider. Now I could redesign the missiles to be a little bit more efficient. There's one missile gone. There's another missile gone. And let's get our autocannon back. Oop, we got the slow motion now as we just blew up one of our enemies. Unfortunately, our other missile looks like it headed for that craft already. Now again, I don't know if this is purposeful where it slows down like this when you have a big explosion, or just, you know, poor optimization at this point. I've already kind of pointed this out in my other videos, that you get a lot of slowdown once you have an explosion like that. Let's fire off the autocannon and try and dodge here. Whoa! We got a little bit of a hit here. Now, these enemies are not particularly hard because their cannons are not really all that powerful or long-ranged. For a more challenging enemy, let's load in a Vanguard. Now, this has a much more powerful cannon and much longer range. There it is there, where my cursor is. It's already starting to fire at us. And I apologize if there's a lot of slowdown right now. As far as my recording software says, there's no frame rate issues, but when you have a lot of action going on in this game, again, optimization and things like that, sometimes it slows down a bit. All right, let's switch over to our missiles. They're ready to go. And hopefully we get the Vanguard in our sights. Again, we can't really control too much how the Seekers go other than the heat signature, but looks like they're going for the target we want. Now let's try and do a run with our autocannons. So far I haven't hit, but the enemy craft I've been going after are pretty small. Alright, get a bit of rudder going. I'm not quite in range, so ooh, there's the cannonballs. Oh, a knight's fallen. Alright, here we go. Lined up. There we go. We got hits on him. Now, the autocannon doesn't do very much damage, so don't be, you know, too surprised that not a whole lot happened there. I hit him because I got the damage, you know, indicator there over in the upper right corner, but how much damage I did was pretty minimal. I also love the chain of experience following me as I'm actually outrunning it. But I think this gives you a pretty good idea of how the airborne craft work. And again, as I said, I'm amazed by this game every time I play it. The more I play it, the more amazed I get. But let's go ahead and slow down here and get ready to land. So we're slowing down a bit. I mean, we still have a good amount of fuel here, but our reserve tank's out, and all the fuel we have is what I'm seeing there being burned down. So we're just slowing down, slowing down. Let's go ahead and slow it down a little bit more. And now we're on the water. Now, the one thing I've kind of noted, though, so far, there's no real collision damage with the water. So there isn't really a threat of smacking into the water hard. So even if I were coming full tilt in a dive into the water, I might go into the water with the collision, but the craft wouldn't take any damage at all. And then maybe that's something that they plan on changing a little bit in the future. But it definitely would cause, you know, flying an airborne craft a lot more hazardous, because you'd have to be careful with your landing approach, especially if you're using some kind of float plane like this. But in any case, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. This is Mouse Gunner signing out.